It's Tuesday night, and we're back with CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. I'm Mercedes Schlapp, and joining me, as usual, as always, is my husband, Matt Schlapp. We've had quite a busy week here in the swamp.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much going on as this new Socialist Democratic Party is showing not only is socialism about bad economics, higher taxes, all these new regulations, the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline, but what you really see at the southern border and what you see with the Black Lives Matter protests is the transformation of America into something that it's hard to even recognize.
It really is, and obviously there's all eyes are on what's happening in Minnesota with the trial there on the police officer and the George Floyd tragic incident. But what we're watching is something I think that is very disturbing. We had a sitting Congresswoman, Maxine Waters, someone who continuously is a controversial character, come out and make this following statement on the protest.
Not just manslaughter, right? I mean,
oh no, not manslaughter. No. This is guilty for murder. I don't know whether it's in the first degree, but as far as I'm concerned, it's first degree murder.
Congresswoman, what happens if we do not get what you just told? What should the people do? What should protesters on the street do?
I didn't hear you.
What happens?
What should protesters do?
Well, we got to stay on the street, and we've got to get more active. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
So we need to get more active. We need to get more confrontational. We need to show that we mean business.
Yeah, that's right. And it's our great honor to have somebody who's given such great service to this country as our first guest, who I think has some strong opinions on this, if I'm reading his Twitter feed correctly. Former New York City Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik. Mr. Commissioner, thanks for being with us on CPAC Now.
Thank you, guys.
What's your reaction when you see that video? I know you've seen it several times. How do you react to that?
I think the first thing that bothers me is, they impeached President Trump or attempted to convict him based on a statement for the people in that crowd on January 6th to go down to the Capitol and peacefully protest and have their voice heard. They impeached him for that. This woman called for the outright confrontation of people in the streets if she didn't get the verdict she wanted. And basically, that's an attempt to influence the jury pool. I personally think she should be locked up, because in any other circumstance, I think if it was any other court, she'd have a serious problem with the court. But the politics is so dynamic here that people are trying to stay away from it. And you have Nancy Pelosi that's basically allowing it.
So let me ask you, Commissioner, obviously you've been on the front lines when you're seeing night after night of the violence that's happening, where there is the continual threat of burning down these cities. How do police officers and the team prepare for what's going to come their way if the verdict is not up to where these individuals and these people that belong to BLM and obviously Antifa, if they don't agree with the verdict and we start seeing more violence happening in these cities?
You know what, Mercedes? It really depends on the governor, and it depends on the mayor of those cities and the city council. Not necessarily the city council, but primarily the mayor and the governor. I can tell you, if that was going on in New York City and I was the police commissioner and Rudy Giuliani was the mayor, he would give me a mandate, and that is, nobody is taking our streets, and you do whatever you have to do to stop it. And I would have full force within the department. And under my command in the NYPD, I had 55,000 men and women that worked for me. But I'd also go to the governor. I'd pull in 10,000 National Guard troops from the governor, and I'd ensure that we had the city safe and secure. And we have no problem with peaceful protests. But the second you throw a bottle or a rock or a Molotov cocktail, or you attack a police officer, the second you do that, it has turned to violence. The crowds will be dispersed. And if they don't leave, they get locked up. That's the way it should happen, and that's the way these other cities should react. But you know what? You have these Marxist, left-wing, radical mayors that are allowing this stuff to happen, and governors as well.
2 points. This is Minnesota. This is Minneapolis, St. Paul, all run by very left-wing Democrats. The jury pool is taken from a very, very blue community. The mayor is as left as you can get. Isn't it interesting that all of this racism that the left is talking about is happening right in the midst of blue America?
Yeah, you know, Matt, I think a lot of people don't realize this, but you know, in many of these cities, I was talking to Vernon Jones the other day from Georgia about this.
We love
and
Vernon.
I love him, and he agreed with me. In many of these cities, the mayor is black, the police chief is black, the district attorney is black, the arresting officer is black. And then you have BLM and Antifa, they come out and they say, this was all about race. It's not about race. There are bad people that do bad things in our communities and communities around this country, and the police have to respond. They don't go out looking for people based on race. They go to areas based on one of two things, either 911 calls or based on a crime map that indicates where the crime's happening in their community. They go to that community. They don't care about race. They don't care about religion, where you come from. It makes no difference. They're going to the high crime spots to address the crime and hopefully reduce it.
In one of your tweets that you sent out talking about the Minnesota governor, basically saying that he just incited violence with his anti-police rhetoric, and followed up by saying that he would not tolerate violence in the streets, another radical left-winger that villainizes the police and victimizes the thugs. Let's talk a little bit about this anti-police rhetoric. I know that when I was traveling during Trump's campaign, we met with a lot of police officers, and there really is the sense of the police force feeling demoralized because there are so many on the Democrat side, like Congresswoman Tlaib, who basically says, you know, is so anti-police, let's abolish the police, pretty much advocating for anarchy. What is your sense in talking to your colleagues and how the policemen and women are feeling right now in terms of them having to perform their jobs effectively?
Well, I think overall, Mercedes, the morale of the police service around the country, you know, they are demoralized. They're being demeaned by their leaders. I've never seen in this field or in the military, in my lifetime, in my entire lifetime, since I was 18 years old and I went in the service, I've never seen a time where the government, the mayors, the governors, the president, the vice president, never in my life have I seen a time where they didn't primarily, first and foremost, support the men and women in law enforcement and the military, because without them, you have no critical infrastructure security in this country. You have national security issues. I've never seen it where you have all these government bodies that are anti-police, but keep in mind, they're anti-police publicly. But as you may have heard, Maxine Waters went to that demonstration yesterday, and she called for a police escort to get there. They're surrounded by bodyguards that are armed, and they're cops, right. They're sworn officers. This is a hypocrisy bigger than anything I've ever seen, but it demoralizes the cops. It breaks them up. You have a lot of people retiring and a lot of people just getting out because they don't want to work for somebody that doesn't want them there.
I know we have another topic we want to talk to you about, but very quickly, as an exit question, we are told by the FBI, we're told by Democrats that Antifa is some kind of mythic thing, even though when we had CPAC in Australia, there was 200 Antifa protesters marked as such with a big banner. Please tell our audience, is Antifa a real thing in this country?
Antifa is a domestic terror group. That's what they are. Right. It's a coordinated effort in every state in this country to basically crucify, ruin the country, destroy the country. They believe in Marxism. They believe in anti-America. They believe in, they don't want the police. They don't want a military. They don't believe in capitalism. They basically believe in everything anti-America, and they use of force, lethal force, and engage in criminal conduct to promote their political beliefs. That's terrorism.
Just switching topics here, you have this Governor Cuomo in New York, who now has gotten a $4 million deal for his book about the pandemic, because apparently he's quite the leader in solving the pandemic. Matt, you were just in New York City. I think you were so depressed when you came back.
I don't want to go back. I mean, between Washington, D.C. and New York City, the failed leadership that resulted in so many deaths. I mean, Commissioner, you must take this quite personally, because these are your friends and neighbors.
Well, you know what, Matt? I take it personally for another reason. When Rudy Giuliani came into office in 1993, we averaged about 2,200 murders. That's more than Atlanta, LA, Baltimore, and Minneapolis combined. Over the 8-year period Giuliani was in office, and I was police commissioner, we dropped violent crime by 65%, dropped murder by 70%, and in the Black community, murder dropped by almost 80%. An unparalleled decline in crime. Never happened before Giuliani, hasn't happened since. I know these things can get fixed, but we have a radical Marxist left-wing mayor in New York City that I believe, and I've said this publicly, has done everything in his power intentionally to destroy that city. And it just continues to deteriorate. And Governor Cuomo has done nothing about it.
Well, we're going to keep an eye on what's happening in Minnesota, and we, of course, would love to get you back on the show to get your analysis once the verdict happens. But Commissioner, you are a champion of freedom, a champion of law and order, and we are so grateful for your public service and, of course, your words of wisdom that we need now more than ever. So thank you, Commissioner Bernie Kerik, on being with us on CPAC Now.
Thanks, guys. Keep up the great work.
God bless you. Welcome back to CPAC Now. God, we just love doing the show, Mercy, and there's so much news.
Well, we got to thank God. You're throwing God out there.
I did throw God, but I meant it in a good way.
Thank God for the show that we're
sometimes
able to
I
do
do
together.
need to clean up my language. It is true, so I can understand why you're saying that.
As Lucia, the little one, always reminds us, Mom, don't
use that word. Don't use the S word. Okay, so what's going on at ACU? A lot.
Well, a lot. We've got a lot going on.
Why is it all going on ever since you started working at ACU? Are you kicking ACU's kind of derriere around?
No way. We have such a talented team, and I think the key is that the battles are getting bigger. In fact, today I was listening to my daily podcast on my, biblical reading, and it was David versus Goliath, and I really thought about how we're in a moment of time that there are these great battles. And it was funny, it was interesting, because when you read that passage of David and Goliath, David ran towards Goliath. He didn't just step back and wait till the big, man, try to attack him. He ran towards him. And so I think here at American Conservative Union, that's what we're doing every day. Yeah. We're running towards the battle. We know what's at stake. We're really willing to fight for it. And one of the things that we've been doing is,
as Reagan said, we're in the thick of the fight.
That's right.
And we're all in this together.
That's right. And so with this new center that we just launched, the Center to Protect Voters and Their Voices, it's becoming very, very active very quickly. We had released our letter to the Major League Baseball commissioner, and we're hoping to have a constructive dialogue. This is about reminding them that conservatives have a very strong voice, and that these organizations and these companies should not cave to the left.
And we're speaking for, more than 75 million Americans, because we're even speaking for a lot of people that might not have voted for President Trump, but hate the idea of ripping apart this country and going after the police, and my gosh, no identification to vote.
That's right. And so we felt it was very important also to reach out to the Delta CEO. The first statement that they put out was basically acknowledging that the new bill, and this is the Georgia voting bill, would expand weekend voting, codifies Sunday voting and protects a voter's ability to cast an absentee ballot without providing a reason. But then 5 days later, they changed their position. They might have gotten some phone calls from certain individuals on the left.
They got pressure.
Got plenty of pressure, basically in talking about the Georgia state law and in essence pulling away from their first public statement, and in essence I think creating a lot of problems there in Georgia. So, you know, again, we want to have a constructive dialogue with Delta. We want to meet with the CEO and share what we know as fact to be the Georgia voting law that we know not only expands voter access, but also, more importantly, puts safeguards to ensure that we have free and fair elections.
Yeah, so the key is we've got to make sure that these entities that we've sent letters to, Delta being the latest that just went out today, that they have to accurately describe what's in these bills. They can't call people like new calls are now being made to Governor Abbott of Texas as they're in their wrap-up session about trying to weaken voter ID and other requirements in the state of Texas. Thank God Governor Abbott is staying strong on all of that. They can't put out fraudulent information on what's in these bills. Second of all, we are a counterbalance to Stacey Abrams and to those intolerant voices on the left who are ripping this country apart by breaking all these democratic norms. We're going to stand up for voter ID. And finally, we want to work with you to remind them that there's millions of consumers out there that love the Constitution and love America.
Yeah, and if you fly an airline, you have to show your ID in order to get on the plane. So these are very common sense steps that we need to have in these voting laws. And we know the vast majority of Americans agree with them.
Of course they do.
Agree with them. And so we are very concerned where these corporations are headed. We've spent a lot of time as a conservative group working with companies to ensure that there's deregulation, to ensure that there's tax reform laws that help create successful businesses and investments here in the United States to make sure that millions of Americans can get employed. But when these companies are being massively pressured by the left in these other issues, that's where we believe it's very important to step up and make sure our voices are heard.
Let's get back to companies running their companies and letting Americans have their opinions on politics. Voter ID, that's not about an opinion. That's about rules-based voting so that we can get rid of this fraud that we saw at overwhelming levels in the last election.
I do want to quickly point out a story that just popped this week. The State Department now is going to list 80% of the countries as, quote, do not travel as it updates its advisory system to align with the CDC and Dr. Fauci. So let's say you get vaccinated.
I miss Mike Pompeo. I miss him. I miss him dearly.
We all miss him. We got to have him on the show too. But basically what they're saying on this travel advisory page is that the CDC notes that, quote, international travel poses additional risk, and even, listen to this, even fully vaccinated travelers are at increased risk for getting and possibly spreading new COVID-19 variants. That means that we're going to delay international travel until you are fully vaccinated. Talk about a complicated message.
Well, even if you're fully vaccinated, right? In this country, they're saying, Tony Fauci's saying you can't have Thanksgiving with your family, you can't eat indoors. I don't even think he wants you to eat at a restaurant, period. It's like the goalposts are constantly changing. And what we got to get back to is this idea of a Constitution and Bill of Rights where you got the ability to govern your life. You know, the left used to say, my body, my choice. I get to run my life the way I want to. But that was all a lie.
But just remember, with this do not travel advisory now that they're pushing forward, think about the airlines. This is going to dramatically impact the airline industry.
Great point.
So, I mean,
and what will they want to do when the travel is restricted? They're going to go back to the American taxpayers to get yet another bailout. And we just can't continue to have shutdowns and bailouts. We're going to be we're already bankrupt.
Right.
But we're going to get to the point of no return with all this spending that's coming out of Washington.
We'll keep fighting. I'm going to keep my mask on so I can stop eating and lose about 10 pounds. But
that's why I want to wear a mask, because I need to stop shoving my face. That is the best argument for mask I've heard.
That's right. But we'll be right back with Josh Mandel.
Welcome back to CPAC Now. We've made so many friends as we traveled the country and the world having CPACs, and our next guest is one of our dearest friends, Josh Mandel, the former treasurer of the great state of Ohio, a state I was born in, by the way, and currently—
I don't think they want you back, Sean.
maybe not. And currently he's running for the Republican nomination for the open Senate seat. He's a great conservative. Josh, thanks for being with us on CPAC Now.
Hey guys, good to be on.
Okay, so I got to start first in Ohio. People get very excited about the numbers of Republican governors we've elected around the country, but you have a Republican governor that seems to kind of like follow the talking points of Anthony Fauci. What is going on in the great state of Ohio, and why isn't your economy fully opened up?
Well, Governor Mike Dewine is a tyrant. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, he's trampled on our liberty, trampled on our freedom. I think he's sort of in love with the moment. You know, he acts as if he was like put here on earth to, fight COVID, and he just can't get enough of himself on TV and it's very much like Fauci. With Fauci, I believe his ego walks in the room about 20 minutes before he does, and they just love himself. On now he's got this new thing with Snapchat. So here's what Dewine did in Ohio. Dewine said, if you're a family-owned restaurant, if you're a hardware store, if you're a beauty shop, you're a barber shop, you got to shut down. But if you're Walmart and you're Costco and you're Target, you get to stay open. How the heck is that in line with conservative values? How is that right in any way, shape, or form? It's just dead wrong. And he really screwed the little guy, the mom and pops, and then he enabled these big woke corporations to take business from little.
Josh, who can throw a baseball farther, Mike Dewine or Tony Fauci?
A lot of people don't know this, but Mike Dewine actually owns a minor league baseball team in North Carolina, so I'm gonna go with Dewine.
But you did tweet out. Apparently, there was a photo of Dewine with where he was not wearing a mask. And you said, do as I say, not as I do. So I think that there is a sense that he, to your point, he's putting these restrictions on the people of Ohio, yet he himself is not following them.
That's exactly it. But listen, Mercy, that's a classic establishment, right?
Right.
They say one thing to the public and they do another thing in reality because they condescend on the voters. They condescend on conservatives.
Totally.
Like with Trump, they would kiss his butt to his face and they would trash him behind his back.
That's right.
That's still going on, believe it or not. But there is so much going on across the country. Obviously, we're watching closely what's happening in Minnesota with the violent protesters there. And you saw Maxine Waters basically go out there and say, we got to be confrontational. We got to be active. They are putting so much pressure on the jury, on the members of the jury. It is scary that, of course, they're not really going to have any choice because they realize that you've got BLM and Antifa that might likely go after them. So walk us through what your reaction was to her comments and how dangerous her comments are in terms of that message that she's promoting.
Very clearly, Maxine Waters is trying to promote violence, and she's a bully. She's trying to bully the jury in the case. In my mind, it's vile and disgusting that Black Lives Matter and all these other organizations that purport to protect Black lives, they're burning down Black-owned businesses. They're burning down police stations. And, Maxine Waters and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, they're at the pointy tip of the spear when it comes to hypocrisy and not really caring about the Black constituents they purport to care about. I mean, their actions are in direct violation to that. And listen, Maxine Waters, she is inciting violence. She's inviting it. We had a congressman. I'm doing this show with you here. I'm in Columbus right now. There's a congressman right here in Columbus. I think I'm in her district. Her name's Joyce Beatty. And, she went out there to rebel rouse as well. And, so they have all these folks in the Congressional Black Caucus around the country descending, on Minnesota to try to rebel rouse and bully the jury. And it's just wrong. And, here in Columbus, I was talking to a cop recently. He told me, listen, we want to protect the people, but we're afraid to do our job because the politicians are trying to make the cops into the bad guys, and they won't even prosecute these BLM rioters. And the whole thing is totally counter to what we know America to be, which is a place where cops are the good guys. We have rule of law, and we do everything we can to keep our neighborhood safe.
You know, you have a congressman in Ohio that voted to impeach President Trump because he said that his words on January 6th incited violence at the Capitol. I keep asking these people, please show me what those words were. The president must have been speaking telepathically because you can't find the words in the speech. Yet you have a sitting Democratic congressman go right in the middle of basically race riots and tell people they got to get a lot more aggressive. How do we square these two things?
You can't square them. It's complete hypocrisy. You know, from the 10 congressmen who voted to impeach Trump, their silence has been deafening on Maxine Waters and what you just said, the inciting of violence there. But listen, you and I both heard very clearly what President Trump said on January 6th. He said, march peacefully. Every American citizen knows what the word peacefully means. And, you know, it's the Republican establishment, the radical left, and the media all in cahoots saw that January 6th as an opportunity to try to take out Trump. But the reality is Trump is stronger than ever here in my state and throughout the country.
So you've been having events, these faith and freedom events in Ohio, reaching out to pastors, reaching out to priests. In essence, you are a champion of religious freedoms. And what we have seen under this COVID lockdown scenarios across the country, and you know I watched a video, actually it was in Canada, where you saw the policemen come in and stop, trying to stop the church services. What's your goal? What is your plan when you're thinking about in terms of, you know, dealing with this pandemic and also ensuring that we protect people's religious liberties?
Well, listen, I believe very strongly that America was founded and grew strong on Judeo-Christian values, not radical Muslim values, not atheism, but Judeo-Christian values. And at the centerpiece of Judeo-Christian values is knowing good versus evil. And we have to always fight for good, and we have to raise up our children to know who are the good guys. And in my mind, the good guys are the police officers, men and women out there every day who are putting it on the line to keep our neighborhood safe. The military, you know, Barack Obama and Joe Biden and the radical left, they've tried to, you know, somehow bring the military down in the eyes of the American people. The Marines and soldiers and sailors and airmen out there, like, those are the good guys. We should be standing for the American flag, and we should be standing up for pastors and priests and rabbis and anyone out there who wants to protect the Judeo-Christian bedrock of America. So, you know, Mercy, last night we had a faith and freedom rally in a town called Bucyrus, small rural town in Crawford County, Ohio. And we had all these pastors there and Christian activists there. And they were on their feet when I was talking about religious liberty and religious freedom and standing up for it. And one of the things I quoted last night was Oswald Chambers, who's a pastor who, you know, he wrote his first book here in the state of Ohio, but he became a preacher all throughout the world. And Oswald Chambers once said something that I believe in very strongly. If you fear God, you fear nothing else. But if you don't fear God, you fear everything else. And what the secular left is trying to do is take God out of everything. And my feeling is we should be going the opposite direction. We shouldn't be watering down on our Judeo-Christian values. We should be doubling down on our Judeo-Christian values and ensuring that God is not only present in churches and synagogues and where people worship and at the kitchen table where we're raising our kids, but also in the classroom and at the water cooler and everywhere we roam.
You know, we, amen, my Jewish brother, at church this weekend, Mercy and I heard a great message from the pastor who basically said, where there's fear, there is no faith. So when we are really fearful, deep to our bones over something, that means we're not focusing enough on God. So I love that message. Going back to this question of what happens when we see Black Lives Matter in these cities, back in the summer, I had criticized Black Lives Matter, not for racial questions, but for this attack on when they said there should be no state of Israel, which I viewed as anti-Semitic. When they said, when they were almost saying that it was okay to go after and desecrate Jewish cemeteries, Christian cemeteries, statues of Jesus, statues of Mary. To me, it's another form of this virulent Christian persecution, anti-Semitism. Do you see that kind of evil spreading throughout the country when you see the terrible views of these groups?
I do see that evil spreading, and we must combat it, and we must have leaders, public officials who are willing to be out front. I'm running for the U.S. Senate here. There's a lot of people running in my race. I can tell you I'm the only one out here talking about religious liberty, religious freedom, and standing up for the Judeo-Christian ethic and bedrock of America. And it's unbelievable. Like, no one else is talking about this, but we're in the middle of this fight. And, as you just referenced, BLM and others, these are bigots. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, they have maps in their office in the U.S. House of Representatives, in the People's House, maps of the Middle East without Israel on the map. I mean, this is just, it's completely insane.
It's propaganda.
It is propaganda. It's lying. But something you just mentioned is an undertold story, is the persecution of Christians throughout the Middle East. And, what's going on in Egypt and Iran and many other countries in the Middle East. They're putting guns to the head of Coptic priests and other Christians and saying, you can convert to Islam or die. And I believe we have a responsibility to stand up for Christians throughout the Middle East and anywhere else who are being persecuted.
One thing I would just say is, when we have all this evil and you see all the evil and hate, and unfortunately members of Congress stoking that hate in Minneapolis, I mean, we got to remember, we got to keep praying for racial harmony. We got to pray for the country. We got to pray that the better angels of our character come out of these tough moments.
Yeah, there is no question. I just want to get a quick 30-second reaction. You put out a tweet. I really thought it was fabulous, because I think you called it the five-legged stool of the Democrat Party that needed to be crushed. I'm almost thinking there's probably like a 10-legged stool, but you said, the abortionists, the government unions, the radical environmentalists, the mainstream media, big tech. How can we stop the Democrat/Socialist Party from implementing this radical agenda?
Yeah, let me take them one by one, Mercy. So first, the abortionists. I, in Ohio, was the first statewide official to stand up for the heartbeat bill to try to make abortion illegal here and outlaw it when the baby's heartbeat can be detected. We have to do everything we can to stand up for the sanctity of life and to protect the unborn. And at the end of the day, the Democrats, they don't believe in the 10 Commandments, because every time they advocate for pro-abortion policies, they are violating thou shalt not murder. And that's a fact. And we have to do everything we can to protect the unborn. Listen, the radical environmentalists, in the Democrat Party, environmentalism has become a religion. They don't want you to believe in Christianity or Judaism. They want you to believe in environmentalism. Here in Ohio, we've become one of the leading states in natural gas exploration. We've been a leading coal state for a long time. And in my state, this is jobs. And we need to fight this issue on jobs, because one of the reasons President Trump won Ohio by 8 points both times, big margins here in Ohio, one of the reasons was because there were so many Democrats who voted for him.
Right.
And so many Democrats who voted for President Trump because he was standing up for those jobs in the coal areas, in the Utica and the Marcellus Shale areas, because in those areas, men and women aren't just working on the rigs. They're driving trucks that haul sand and water. They're working as waiters and waitresses, where the restaurants are more packed, the hotels are more packed, and it's just a dynamic impact on the environment. And we have to keep hammering that message. And the more they go for the Green New Deal, and the more we stand up for natural resource exploration as a means to jobs for Ohioans and Americans, we'll keep winning. When it comes to combating them on the government unions, I talk a lot about how the teachers unions care about adults, but not kids. And we saw that squarely with these government shutdowns of the schools, where the teachers unions would not allow kids go back to school, especially in the inner cities, in the urban areas. Yeah. And it was vile. It was probably the most significant racial injustice in any of our lifetimes, where out in the suburbs, private schools and the wealthier school districts were back in school, but in the urban areas, the teachers unions wouldn't let poor Black, Hispanic, and poor white families put their kids back in school. I mean, it was awful. And then you mentioned the other two legs of the stool, the mainstream media and big tech. They are departments of the Democrat Party. I've been plain dealer canceled me. They won't even cover me because I came out against mask mandates. I've been kicked off Twitter. I've been kicked off Facebook. Facebook told me it was a quote unquote enforcement error. that they mistakenly kicked me off. And it's interesting how the enforcement errors only happen against conservatives. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
We have to be out there on Front Street combating mainstream media and big tech and educating our people to be out front on it.
And we can't allow a sixth leg of that stool to become corporate America, which is why we must fight very early in this battle and fight hard and push them back to neutrality.
Josh Mandel, our Republican Senate candidate in the state of Ohio, thank you so much for joining us. And remember, y'all, tomorrow we've got Senator Ted Cruz on our show. So we're very excited about that. But make sure to follow us on all of our social channels. That includes Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at CPAC. And follow at mschlapp on Twitter, and me, Mercedes Schlapp, at Mercedes Schlapp. Josh, where can they find you?
They can find me at joshmandel.com. So any of your viewers and fellow patriots can go to joshmandel.com if they want to volunteer, if they want to donate, if they want to support the cause. I'm also on in Twitter, Josh Mandel Ohio. We're back on Facebook after we got that enforcement error suspension. And listen, we're doing everything we can to stand up for the Judeo-Christian foundation of America and to stand up for the Constitution. And what I told people at the Victory and Truth Ministry Church last night in Bucyrus, Ohio, I said, when I'm a United States Senator, making decisions is going to be very easy because I'm going to have two documents in my hand as the guide. Bible in one hand, Constitution in the other.
Well, that sounds great. Josh, you're a great patriot. We're so thrilled to just know you and spend time with you and call you a friend. So thank you for joining us on CPAC Now. And that's it for us tonight, but we'll see you tomorrow night.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, guys. Proud to call you friends, too.